A very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Ashish and you're watching the series of Bipin Chandra. Now we have done the first two chapters, India's struggle for independence, and in the corollary of that chapter, as I told you, the first three chapters have to be done in unison. That is the first starting with 1857, followed by civil and tribal rebellions that we have already covered. And now if you're watching it, you're watching the third chapter, and that is the coming up of peasant movements and uprisings around 1857. So 1857, around or just after 1857, what kind of peasant rebellions were going on or uprisings were going on, that we have to deal in this chapter. Now, all kind of rebellions or revolt were in a way circling around peasants. If you can see a small type of flow chart that I have made here in order for you to understand that peasant movements just circled around three important characters in Indian history. And that is, number one, the moneylenders. Peasants were forced to borrow money from the moneylenders, right? And these moneylenders were none other than Indian merchants. Now, why they borrowed money from the moneylenders is in unison to pay taxes to our zamindars, right? Zamindars were nothing but landlords. So in order to pay taxes to the landlords, peasants used to borrow money. If I may use different color, they used to borrow money from our moneylenders. And what happened to those money, those taxes? That was circled to the British government. Now, British government was the ultimate benefactor. British government had the ultimate beneficiary of this circle of poverty in which our peasants were at the center. And this was instituted, or in a way this was fueled, this circle of poverty or violence, whatever you would like to call it, was fueled by their policies of land revenue extractions. So what were the policies of land revenue extractions? In the previous lecture, we have seen the policies of permanent settlement, that how permanent settlement was introduced by Lord Cornwallis in 1793, that led to the zamindars becoming the owners of the land. And they were forced to cuff up, they were forced to give extra amount of land revenue, which was fixed by Britishers themselves, right? So they were serving their own cause. Here, we are going to learn about a new form of land revenue system that got introduced in South India or Deccan part of India, right? And that is what we call as Rayathwari Settlement. Although Professor Bipin Chandra does not delve that much into what is Rayathwari Settlement as such, but he discusses three most important revenue-based peasant agitations, and that is Indigo Revolt, followed by Pabna agitation, and the Deccan Revolt of 1875. So three important peasant-based revolts after 1857 he discusses with us in this chapter, and they are all concerned mostly with Rayathwari settlement, sometimes with extra land revenue extractions. And these will be the characters that you will keep on seeing in all the three cases. So before even we begin with the chapter, that's what I've told you. See, the simple thing is that peasants were forced to take money from the moneylenders to pay taxes. These taxes were then given to zamindar because zamindar used to extract something more. For example, let's suppose if 1 crore is being cuffed up from the entire area of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, understand that zamindar will not be giving all of that to the British government. He must be keeping something with himself. And moneylenders here must be getting interest. So everywhere who was getting impoverished, who was getting deeply into the circle of poverty, it was our peasant. You can even use such kind of flowcharts in your answers in order to make the examiner understand that it was the ultimate loss of our dear peasant, no one else. So the third point here is that government facilitated the seizures of land of peasants in case you were not able to give taxes. So what happened? Your land was seized. Who helped that seizing of lands? Of course, the government through its own degrees. And finally, Rayathwari system, government itself became the largest landholder. Yes, it became the largest landholder. Government, that is the colonial government themselves, became the owners of the land. How? This is what we have to see in Rayathwari Settlement. Now, Rayathwari Settlement is not written in the chapters of Bipin Chandra, but here I'm providing you one step ahead so that some chapters which are not properly dealt, for example, he says that Rayathwari Settlement becomes responsible for bad situation of peasants in South India, or impoverished state of peasants in South India, but he does not explain Rayathwari Settlement as such. So it was introduced in Deccan part after the introduction of permanent settlement in northern part of India. So in southern part of India, it was introduced 1820 to 27 during the governorship of Thomas Munro. Thomas Munro, along with Alexander Reed, became responsible for introduction of the Rayathwari settlement. And what happened in this? Madras presidency largely was settled under this new type of land revenue extraction philosophy or policy. What was there? Peasants were directly called as the point of revenue collection. See, Rayathwari means, Rayat means, actually in Hindi it is, or the Persian word is Rayat. Okay? Rayat Azad hai or something like that. Rayat means in a way common farmers. Now Rayat, and from their word coming Rayathwari, that means the British government was directly dealing now with Rayats or peasants here. So they wanted the peasants to have the land ownership instead of zamindars as we saw in the type of permanent settlement. So here the peasants were the landowners, and they had to give the rent, on a stipulated time on a well-defined manner. And if they were not able to give rent, let's suppose on time, so the Britishers confiscated, or the government confiscated their lands. What did Britishers seem to achieve from this type of settlement? Basically, Britishers devised this settlement because they wanted to eliminate all the intermediaries. Earlier, Britishers kept zamindars as the big intermediary between them and the peasants. Understand this part very dearly, my dear students, that earlier, particularly in the times of permanent settlement in North India, they used to collect rent from the peasants only. They were the point source of collection, but who did this job for Britishers? It was zamindars. Now they wanted to eliminate this middleman and directly deal with peasants. That was what Rayathwari settlement was all about, right? So here they eliminated the intermediary, and basic was that Britishers demanded around 50 to 60% of the land revenue. That was far much more as compared to what land revenue system was envisaged during the time of permanent settlement. But anyways, this is what Rayathwari settlement is all about, and it in a way affected the peasants of South India the most. We will see it in the case. But before we even go ahead with it, dear students who are watching us from the comforts of your home, I must tell you that this series of Bipin Chandra is one such series of the books that we are doing. I'm sure that when you're preparing for UPSC, you need a larger comprehensive preparation. And for that, I understand that you have to read geography, economics, science and tech, polity, so on other subjects. Now for that, we have the comprehensive classes for you, right? Not just one book. Suppose if I'll be taking your history lectures, I'll not just be taking your history lectures on the basis of Bipin Chandra, but I'll also be taking on the basis of 5 other books. That will be the comprehensive education that you will be provided for starting your UPSC preparation in classrooms. Now that is what you need to clear mains. This is what you need to make sure, that at the end of the day, you don't have to struggle to prepare separately for prelims, separately for mains, and then separately for interview. That is why we have a batch called Prelims to Interview. That is, we take your responsibility to make sure that you find your name in the final list from prelims, starting your preparations from prelims from scratch up till you find your name in the interview list and then in the final list. And this is a comprehensive preparation. By the way, this is also our mains residential program. You heard it right. When you clear your prelims, we'll be calling you back to our campus in Delhi and Gurgaon so that you can come here and start rigorous preparation for mains for the next 4 months after the declaration of results of prelims, so that you can do it in an offline mode with us daily in a rigorous way. So this is both an online and an offline module. The moment you clear your prelims, we'll call you back again to study with us, to make sure answer writing, one-to-one mentorship, along with daily problem solving becomes your forte, becomes your strength. So that, see, prelims is just the, qualifying stage. Its marks doesn't count when you have the final list or the final merit list being compiled. The marks of mains are the most important in order for you to get a rank in UPSC Civil Services. That for us is also very important, right? So we'll be having a separate main strategy. Again, in the same course, we'll be giving you this, right? When you want to apply for this course, understand you have to use a code called AshLive. If you don't use your code, you'll be forced to pay up much more, right? In fact, any other code will give you a less kind of discount, around 30,000 on so on so forth, even around going to 32,000, 31,000. But when you apply a faculty code, that is when you come up with a faculty code, for example, the code of AshLive, right? This code gives you the heightened discount, maximum discount that you can find. Use this code, lower your class rates. Understand that we are offering you an affordability with a quality quotient. Understand that your mains preparation is also included in this. So when you will be called to Delhi, your staying, lodging, boarding, right? Everything will be taken care of under this batch itself. It is one of an opportunity, one of a kind opportunity, not offered by anyone else, but by StudyIQ. The aim is to secure a rank for you, to secure a rank for a diligent student like you, who is sitting out with their notes open, books open, and wants to do something for himself or herself and for the country as well. So I know that you are out there. I know you are trying to make good of it. Understand that for all batches, even if you're watching it after the past due date, for all the batches, you can use the code AshLive. For all kind of courses on StudyIQ, you can again use the code AshLive. You'll get maximum discounts. Don't wait for any kind of other opportunities to strike upon your door. Use it. Use your time. It is very precious, right? So if you want to give 2024 examinations, this is the batch for you. Going ahead, the first revolt that Bipin Chandra talks about very dearly to us, and that is the Revolt of Indigo. A dye which was used to color materials, to color cloth. Indigo, as called Neel in Hindi, Neel ki kheti or indigo plantation, was a very important asset for Britain during the time of Industrial Revolution. Understand that indigo was a natural dye which was used. At the same point of time, indigo impoverished Indian peasants. It was like a curse for Indian peasantry. Why? Here you are seeing, I've used some archival photos to tell you how indigo farmers, indigo basically is a legume crop, and it fixes nitrogen in the soil also. So earlier, Indian peasants used it along with crop rotation along with parallel cropping with rice. So rice was planted, and on the side bunds of your agricultural fields, indigo plants were also in a way planted. But the Britishers made good use of them. They extracted it and they made sure that the dye would be used for coloring of clothes, right? So indigo was a natural dye which was planted all over Bihar, Bengal, Odisha region forcibly. It was forced for farmers to grow indigo now. Now, why were they forced? Is because British planters wanted them to sow the indigo, right? It was the British planters, right, as you're seeing here, who wanted them to sow indigo on all of their fields, not some part of their fields, but on all of their fields. and Indian peasants were forced to take up an advance. That I'm giving you an advance. Let's suppose I give you a few hundred of rupees and say that, okay, now you buy the soil and you buy the crops and you buy the seeds out there, you buy some farming implements, you buy some fertilizers if you need, take this advance. And when the time comes for harvesting, I will pay you up. Now that was also like a false promise. The market price of indigo was deliberately kept less by the Britishers, and the poor peasants were even paid less than the market price. So this was a double whammy for them. This was a double loss for them. See, price paid for indigo was far below the market price. Price paid to our farmers was much far below. J.B. Grant, who was the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal at that point of time, had surmised it in a very beautiful manner. He was writing a letter to his subordinates, and he said that the root of the whole question, that the question of Indigo Revolt, the root of the whole question is the struggle to make the Rayats grow indigo plant without paying them the price of it. The Britishers never wanted to pay them a price of it, deliberately kept the price of the indigo low, and gave them some meager advance to grow the crop on their soil. Now, this was a loss situation for Indian peasantry, but a very good proposition for the Britishers. Anyways, the planters were hands in gloves with the government. Remember, these are British planters. These are not members of the government, but they are British planters as such. They are erstwhile members of the East India Company. East India Company's rule was abolished in 1857 itself. But here, the planters were there, who were conniving with the government, who were hands in glove with the government. And they had this coercive mechanism to force peasantry to grow indigo by kidnapping, looting, burning the peasants' huts, their homes. At the same point of time, they also used force. Sometimes their women, children were also made destitute. That kind of forcible, in a way, growing of indigo became one of the most devastating aspect of Bengal peasantry during the time period of middle of 19th century. Now, if you can imagine, there was a couplet that was used, and the couplet was "Jai Rakshak Se Bhakshak," that who is our protector, he himself is our destroyer. He himself is our devourer. He is the person who destroys us. Who is supposed to protect us, he only destroys us. Why? Because Bipin Chandra says in his chapter that during the time period of 1857, 29 planters were made district magistrates, honorary district magistrates, along with one Indian zamindar also. So you can imagine, if planters were given the position of honorary district magistrate, that means they were having judicial powers, and they can tell anybody that if you don't grow indigo crop according to my price and according to my willing, then I can confiscate your land. It's as simple as that. So the government orders were officially sanctioned by these merchants themselves. That became the tough part. Now, the revolt started with a misreading by an Indian deputy magistrate. It's very interesting to know that there was an Indian deputy magistrate known as Hem Chandra Kar. And Hem Chandra Kar misread an official letter saying that from now onwards, he was the magistrate of a place called Kalarao, deputy magistrate. And he said that from now onwards, Indian ryots will not be forced to grow indigo. They may grow any crop that they desire. So, in their ryots or in their field, and no planter or whomsoever can come and force them. Now, when this statement came from a deputy magistrate of Indian origin, people started erupting in Bengal in resistance. All over, ryots in Bengal started, coming up in resistance. How was that? The beginning was made in Govindpur. Again, this is a place in Bengal, and it was led by two people, Bishnu and Digambar Biswas. They were the former employees of a planter. They used to work at a planter's office, and then later on they resigned. They organized indigo strikes. That means the peasants simply refused to take money as advances for growing indigo crops. That, okay, sir, we will not take your money. If I will not take, even my brother will not take, even the next Rayat will not take, even the next farmer will not take. Like this, the whole village will only not take any kind of advances from you, any kind of advances from any indigo planter. So that was a social boycott that was arranged. Peasants refused to take advances. They organized their own armed men. Now, the next step was, when they refused to take advances, they were visited by armed goons from those planters, right? They were visited by lathets, those who, kind of forcibly manhandled you, physically harmed you, right? Those kinds of people. And these, to counter them, even the peasants had their own lathets. So there was growing up of an armed resistance in the countryside of Bengal. It was fascinating to watch that. Harish Chandra Mukherjee, who had Indian Patriot as his, Hindu Patriot as his newspaper, covered it brilliantly. He covered it well, and he popularized it in the cities of Bengal, particularly in Calcutta. Indian intelligentsia, the Calcutta intelligentsia, the Calcutta Bhadralok group, they became aware of peasants' problems in the rural parts of Bengal, and it became a sort of a national agenda at that point of time. Not just that, Deen Bandhu Mitra, he wrote a popular play called as Neel Darpan. Now, Neel Darpan became like a go-to book in order to understand what is happening with respect to indigo in Bengal. So everybody was looking for this brilliant play written by Deen Bandhu Mitra, and it became very famous. Even you'll be surprised to know that missionaries were also supporting. And one of the missionaries translated the play Neel Darpan in Bengali, from Bengali to English, and he was also jailed. So even British missionaries helped the Indian peasantry in order to come away from the ruts of indigo as such. Anyways, after this, the British government started backing, and they started making some laws in order to change the relationship between planters and indigo cultivators. So the idea is, why government backed on indigo? Why government, refused to help the planters? Number one, Santhal Uprising had just ended. Look at the timings of Indigo Revolt. Indigo Revolt happens in 1859 to 60. So before that, there were two major important events that happened, and that basically crushed the Britishers' morale. One was the Santhal Uprising that happened in 1856, which we have already talked about in the previous lecture. The second was the 1857 revolt itself. 1857 revolt had weakened the government response already because East India Company's rule was shattered after that. So they didn't want to trouble the Indian peasantry as such. Government issued a notification in 1860 November saying that the planters cannot force Rayats into accepting the contracts for indigo. And this was considered as the major victory for indigo farmers in Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, particularly in Bengal, where this agitation was led in the areas of Gobindpur district by Bishnu and Digambar Biswas. Now that made indigo planters or indigo plants, where they used to process indigo crop, they started dying a slow death. They started, closing factories. Indigo planters, indigo British planters started, going away from the rural areas of Bengal. And finally, the demand of indigo itself lost its steam. The demand of indigo itself came down. Why? Because artificial dye was created. An artificial dye was created in Europe, particularly in Germany and France, after this time period, that led to slump in the demand of a natural dye. And this is how Indigo Revolt or Indigo's agitation also dies. So this was a very interesting crop-based agitation going on. But it was not just the crop-based agitation that you will see it here. I must also say that Pabna issue was one such issue where the peasants were not fighting And I repeat, peasants were not fighting the Britishers. Peasants were fighting the zamindars now, right? And it's a very interesting issue which I wanted to tell you about Pabna. Now, let me say it in here in this way, that they were fighting the zamindars and not the Britishers, as I told you. Why is that so? We'll see it here. See, Pabna is a district in the eastern Bengal part, and a large part of eastern Bengal, peasants particularly, suffered because of a very simple reason, that they had to pay a number of illegal high taxes to zamindars. The zamindars were forcing them to pay illegal abwabs. Abwabs is basically cess, tax on tax, cess or surcharge. For example, let's suppose the taxes are 30% of your crop production. So fine, 30% you will pay to the zamindar. But the zamindar will ask you 5% more tax. Why will he ask me 5% more tax? He will say that, look, you are cutting the crop and bringing the crop to my area and then processing the crop. So I will take charge for processing of crops. If you process those crops in my area, let's suppose I have to give taxes to a zamindar, I will take the unharvested, I will take, let's suppose I have to separate the grain from the shaft. So I'll take the rice grains, unprocessed rice grains, I will take it to the zamindar's bay area, which was sometimes called as Khalihan, you know, the bay area where zamindar's major godowns would be there. And there I would process my grains, you know, separate grain from the shaft and all. So the zamindar will ask me, okay, you're doing it in my area, so you should pay a tax also on that. The second tax, he may ask me surcharge. He may ask me that, okay, you are using my transportation, you are using my bullock carts, okay, you are using my men, so I will also charge you for that. Third, he may ask for that, look, I have to reconvert your grains into money. You know, there is also conversion because I have to pay to the Britishers. So for that conversion, I am charging you extra charge. So peasants were not complaining about the tax as such, which they had to pay as a fixed tax to the Britishers via zamindars. That was fine. But they were very much afraid that they had to pay an extra illegal surcharge to the zamindar, which he invented for himself, which he was asking on his own will. Now, I am not supposed to give that tax because Britishers didn't ask me so. You, zamindar, are asking me so to do that. And hence, the riots made bands village by village against zamindars, attempt to, you know, collect additional taxes or abwabs from them. They didn't want this additional taxes to be given to the zamindars. Now, that was the main issue. Now, zamindars, the second issue was also this, that zamindars wanted to prevent the riots from gaining the ownership rights. See, there was a Act number 10 of 1859, and this allowed riots to become the owners after a specified period of time when they were tenants. So let's suppose if I'm a tenant for last 10 years or 12 years or 20 years, then I cannot be evicted from the land because I will have some ownership rights on the land as well. Now, that was a big challenge for the zamindars, and they wanted to get rid of tenants every year. So every year they wanted to change the tenants. Now, because of all of this, they started asking for more additional tax. That is, zamindars started asking for more additional tax, and the peasants were very much agitating with this. The peasants proclaimed, and this is a very interesting statement which is only coming from Pabna, and you must read the statement. It says that they wanted to be the riots of Her Majesty alone. That is, the peasants were saying that we want to give tax to Her Majesty, that is to Queen Elizabeth alone. We don't want to give taxes to zamindar. Why are you putting zamindar in middle? This was what Pabna agriculturalists or peasants demanded. And they had one more slogan. They said that Nij Kamre Dhan Tolo. They used to say this. That means, please process your grains in your own bay area, in your own farms, don't go to Zamindar's farm, because if we go to his farm, he asks us for more taxes. We want, that means peasants here wanted to deal directly with Britishers. They did not want this middleman called Zamindar here. They wanted to eliminate them. Now this made Pabna a bit different. Okay? Now Pabna is located in the Yusufzai Pargana of the Pabna district in eastern Bengal, but it later on spread, in a huge way. Very interestingly, it so happened that the government response in Pabna was far from oppressive. Government was not oppressive in Pabna. Here I've showed you a painting how the farm areas, or how a farmer in the eastern Bengal region. Again, these paintings are coming from East India Company themselves. They are called as company or bazaar paintings as such, and colonial paintings also. So when they visualize a farmer kind of a person, they visualize the whole family as such. And the government was not oppressive towards Pabna, because as even compared to Santals or Munda revolt, which we saw earlier, because the peasants were asking for government, or were asking for for the British government to directly deal with them rather than keep a zamindar in between. So peasants were petitioning government to collect the rent directly and not through middlemen like zamindars and jotedars. Jotedars are also nomenclature which is used for middlemen. See, UPSC uses these words to give questions. They have many questions which are just based on some terms. So they have asked questions on the terms of zamindars. They might ask you questions on the terms of jotedars. So again, jotedars are nothing but middlemen. Now, Bengal Rent Bill was introduced in early 1880s because of this revolt. Basically, the revolt started in 1873 and it spread all over Eastern Bengal and Bengal region as such. But in early 1880s, British government introduced a Bengal Rent Bill, which was even supported by Indian Association, which was a political group at that point of time led by Surendranath Banerjee. So he supported the bill. Later on, 1885, Bengal Tenancy Act was passed, and which gave peasants to know their fixed rent. The peasants' rents were fixed now, and they were also given some form of occupancy rights to the real tenants of the soil, to the real tillers of the soil. So this was considered as one of the victories of the Pabna agriculturists. Now, finally, coming to the third important peasant-based revolution or peasant-based revolt that Bipin Chandra talks of, and that is the Deccan Revolt in 1875. And believe me or not, this revolt is related to the question of cotton. See, the first revolt that we saw was related to the question of indigo, very important cash crop, right? This revolt is related to another very important cash crop called cotton. So what is it? See, the Deccan area is rich in black soil, right? The Regur soil. You will study it in geography. That is an excellent argillaceous clay soil, which is very good for production of cotton. So Deccan area was naturally chosen as the place for cotton production. But suddenly, why in 1860s it was chosen? See, in the world market, America, Egypt and India provides huge amount of cotton. We have been growing cotton since the time of Indus Valley civilization. But America's long staple cotton is huge in demand even today. So in 1860s, when America had American Revolution, right? American Civil War. American Revolution happened in 1776. Here in 1860s, America was having civil war on the question of slavery. The North and the South part of America were fighting with each other. And you will study that under the leadership of Abraham Lincoln, this question of slavery was issued or settled, and slavery was abolished in America after the Civil War. But here, because of the Civil War, in some ways, India was also affected. That the cotton from America stopped coming to the world market, and Indian cotton demand suddenly increased. So suddenly there was a huge increase in the cotton demand coming from India because America stopped supplying it. You can imagine it in this way, that right now Ukraine and Russia are fighting. So suddenly the demand of wheat coming from Ukraine has stopped, and Indian wheat demands have increased manifold, right? In fact, the wheat demand from India, China, Pakistan is now coming out more in the world. So somewhere, whenever war disrupts the global supply chain, some other countries, benefit out of it. India was benefiting it in the same way. So the demand for cotton increased, Indian cotton increased because of the American Civil War in 1860s. And because of that, the Maharashtra Kunbi peasants, as you can see it here, the Maharashtra Kunbi peasants, or the peasants of Maharashtra Deccan area, were given huge loans. They were suddenly given huge loans by money lenders. Here again, the money lenders come into question. So money lenders started giving them loans, especially outside money lenders like Gujarati, Marwadi money lenders. They started giving them loans so that they can start cotton production in their areas. But civil war will not go forever, right? In 1864, after 1864, when civil war was coming to its end, American cotton again started coming up into the international market, and those poor peasants of Maharashtra did not find any buyer for their cotton. Now they had to pay their loans back. Not only that, they had to pay their loan backs, but the government also increased their land revenue by 50%. And when they were not able to pay their loan back, their land was confiscated, their properties started being zabt, or their properties started, getting mortgaged. The court decrees particularly made that their, if I would say, their property, their areas, their farms, even their houses were razed to the ground. Their even animal wealth were taken away. That by the Marwadi and the Gujarati middlemen, or the money lenders, helped by the government themselves, because the government courts helped these people to extract their loans from the poor peasants. Now basically, the revolt started in Shirur Taluka in Kharda district of Deccan, where a money lender called Kaluram did not hesitate to raise the house of one poor Kunbi peasant when he could not pay loan. When that happened, everybody started boycotting the outside money lenders, outside, that is non-Maharashtrian money lenders. So they started their social boycott. All the village bulottedars, they were called as the village servants. See, village had their own barbers, their own washermen, their own, if I would say, cleaners, shopkeepers, priests, so on and so forth. So all of the village bulottedars stopped giving services to the money lenders. They made the social boycott possible, because in majority, the people who lived in Deccan areas were the Maharashtrian Kunbi peasants, and in minority were the money lenders. So a social boycott made the living of money lenders virtually impossible in the Deccan area. Not only that, the debt bonds, the bonds which the peasants had to sign before taking an advance from the money lenders, those were seized and burnt by the peasants. Not only that, the peasants knew the exact causes of their miseries, that these debt bonds are the exact causes of our miseries. Pune Sarvajanik Sabha, which was led by Mahadev Govind Ranade, Justice Mahadev Govind Ranade at that point of time, even gave political support to the peasant-based agitation going on in Deccan area. And the Bombay intellectuals, the Bombay Presidency intellectuals also spotted them. Now, because of all of this, the Deccan Revolt became famous. British government passed a Deccan Agriculturist Relief Act 1879, which granted them certain protections against moneylenders. The moneylenders were prohibited from confiscating the lands of the peasants and making them pay the interests, which they never asked for in the first place. So these three important revolts, that is Indigo, Pabna and Deccan, tells you that there was huge understanding between moneylenders, zamindars and the British government, and peasants wanted to get rid of the British, wanted to get rid of the zamindars as well as the moneylenders. Now, what were the weakness of peasant revolts? This is what at the end of the chapter Bipin Chandra says. He says that these kinds of revolts which happened, between 1857 till the time period of 1920s, right, before the nationalist agitation could even start. They said that the peasants asked for concessions from the Britishers itself. So they asked for help from the Britishers. So there was no anti-colonial attitude among peasants. They just wanted to get rid of zamindars and moneylenders. That is what he says. That is what Bipin Chandra says. Second, he says that the peasants never demanded in a way the right of self-assertion. So there was no question of decreasing land revenue. They didn't want to decrease land revenue. They just didn't want to give it to the zamindars, right? There was no question of asking for demands like voting or asking for demands like political representation, etc. They did not ask for any kind of such kind of political motives. All that they wanted, that their land revenue should be given directly to the Britishers rather than having middlemen in the picture. And then finally they said, and what Bipin Chandra says, that the peasants were localized in their agitation. What do you mean by localized? For example, we have seen three peasant agitation. Indigo was just localized in Bengal, Pabna in eastern Bengal, not just whole of Bengal, and Deccan Revolt in south of India, particularly just in Maharashtra. So he says that there was no all India character to these kinds of peasant based revolts, and that is what made them very limited in their effectiveness. So this was basically the weakness also of the peasant revolts that you have seen in this chapter. Now, this is what was important for you to summarize at the end. Now understand, after 1920s, you still have peasant agitations. After 1920s, also you will have some kind of peasant agitation, and they will have a change in character. What change in character? They will become anti-colonialist. They will ask for reduction in the land revenue system or land revenue rates, and they will have political agendas also. The peasants themselves will have political agendas, and those chapters we will do in chapter number 16, 17 much later on, when we will do Gandhian nationalism. So this was the chapter 3rd of the peasant uprisings after 1857. Before I even end the lecture, I would again like to remind you, dear students, when you want to prepare and you want to see your name in the final list of 2024, P2I batch, that is prelims to interview batch, is there for you, which will prepare you for prelims, mains and interview. Prelims, you will be teaching, you'll be having our lectures in an online mode. When you will clear prelims, you will have the lectures in an offline mode at our campus at no additional cost with just this cost. You have to use the code ASHLIFE in order to get this price at this here and this listing, otherwise you'll be forced to pay much more, right? Use the code. Make sure that you use this responsibility, use this opportunity as well, yeah, and it is a responsibility on you that you fulfill your goals. I know there are very less, products in the market which holds your hand from prelims till the point in time that you are, selected for the interview stage. This is one such opportunity available for you, right? Use this opportunity. Make your UPSC preparations comprehensive, alive, determined, right? And the most effective. Thank you for watching it. Look out for the next few chapters where we'll be discussing about the interesting aspects, and I'll tell you, very interesting aspects of the foundation of Congress, the myth related to it, the stories related to it, and there is no other historian better than Bipin Chandra who describes, because he has done a very primary research on this topic, that how Congress was born and what were the stories of secret spies, babas, and myths related to it. So watch out for the next few chapters: the foundation of Congress, myth, and the reality of Bipin Chandra's struggle for India's independence. Thank you. My name is Ashish.